We're good to go?
Good to go.
Okay. So, Ede hebben we gaan reden, wil ik zeggen naar paar Wörter. For those who don't understand. The old Yiddish orators would say, before I start speaking, I'd like to say a few words. Okay. All right, the first thing is, I think we picked it up. It's too close, too close.
Too close?
Yeah, they'll hear me. You'll hear me, don't worry. You don't hear me in the back, just tell me, okay? Okay, first thing I want to thank the committee for inviting me to speak, for Rabbi Stein, his infinite patience, okay, and David Winter's help as well. Turns out when I clicked on the website for the video, it's clear that a family has donated money for this website for a live feed, and for maintaining it online that people can look at it later. Family wishes to remain anonymous. It's very classy, to say the least. I'm personally thankful because in the lighter sense for me personally, I get to say hello to my grandchildren in Chicago. Can't say hello to my grandchildren in Israel. I hope they're asleep at 3 in the morning, correct? A little more seriously, a number of friends have, both here and in Israel, have shown interest in the talk. So the fact that it's on video and people can catch it online or right now is for me very personal. I think the real serious part of this grant is the fact that we have a permanent record that anybody can come along and ultimately, if we say something worthwhile, can ultimately check it out, learn it, review it, or if someone comes 5 years from now, the stuff is available. It's really tremendous. The true serious purpose is that it raises the bar, okay? The quality has to go up if the thing is going to be a permanent record, etc. And the best I can do is hope that I measure up. Okay, if you notice, the background is always, I figured I had to get a little, I'm so used to blackboards, I had to get a substitute, you know. So we have a 14th century manuscript of the title page of Amor Nevuchim. That's the general background I use for the talks. At the bottom on the right, there's a shout out to my CTO, Hillel Hochstein. If you're not sure what a CTO is, my Chief Technology Officer. And he has his ever-capable colleague, Gavidov Hochstein. They took me through they initiated me into PowerPoint, so this is a maiden voyage, so, okay. Just a short apology, so to say. When it's a bit of chutzpah, we're giving a lecture series on the Rambam, and we're giving 4 talks. It's kind of, you know. In fact, when I was chatting with my son Simi, and I said, yeah, I'd like to do this, that. He says, Dad, you don't want 4 talks, you want 14. So the best we'll do, of course, is we'll go down to the beach and we'll put our toes in the water, correct? We'll see a little here, a little there, and we'll check if the water's okay. And the purpose of the lecture series clearly is to say, come on in, the water's fine. That's the goal of the talks, okay? Okay, the world of the Rambam. Okay, I'm not sure this is all that clear. The real world of the Rambam is over here, this part here. So we're talking about southern Spain, northern Africa, Egypt, and there's a short period in Eretz Yisrael. Up here we're in Iraq, near Baghdad. Pumbedita is on this side, and Baghdad is on that side. It's a quirk from the Google Earth program. And for Surah and Pumbedita, we'll talk about that later, the great yeshivas of the Gaonim. And up there, Lunel, that's a place that shows up in Provence, that shows up at the end of the story. So we'll find out about that. Okay? Okay. We want to take our imaginations. We're leaving, so to say, the 21st century. We want to go back to the 12th. In order to get us up and running, we really want to back up even a little more. Okay? We'll start very quickly with early Islam to get to the spot that we want to focus on. All right? So Muhammad is born in 570, and Kavayachal, the Quran, is revealed to him when he's 40 years old, so that puts it at 610. Was not received well in Mecca at all, where he lived, and he actually had to escape to Medina. In Medina, further south, we're sort of in western Saudi Arabia right now, and Medina is further south. There he was well received. And indeed, in 630, he's able to come back and capture Mecca. At the time he dies in 632, he controls a sliver between Mecca and Medina. Okay? After he dies, he's followed by, after he dies, he's followed by what is called the Rashidun Caliphate, rightly guided Caliphate. These are leaders that were in his circle, and among acclamation inside the circle, they were chosen to lead the Muslims. The first one was, the first two are fathers-in-law of Muhammad. He had 10 wives. Okay. In fact, that quietly comes up in the Morah. Okay. Okay. Abu Bakr, in the 2 years that he led the Muslims, basically captured the full Saudi Arabian peninsula. Okay. Umar really defeated the Sasanians, namely the Persian Empire, and you can see at the height of his conquests. Okay. He captured Yerushalayim in 637. And the Sasanian Empire really covered quite a bit. To say the least, he's going from Egypt into Libya in the west. In the east, he's already touching Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Turkmenistan. And up in the north there, he's already well into Georgia, okay, and Armenia. So in the 10 years that he led, their armies really just simply swept over that whole section of the world. The next leader was Uthman, and he's the one that's important for us. He consolidated Umar's hold on the Sasanian Empire, and he extended it, okay, well into Afghanistan and Pakistan, to say the least. But what's crucial for our story is that he was the first one. He started to bring in his own relatives, his own clan, as officers and as administrators, and so, in short, he started to set up a dynasty. After he died, so Ali, who was the son-in-law of Muhammad, who was married to Fatima, all right, in the beginning of the Shiites, he ruled for 4 years, but that was it. Afterwards, the Umayyad dynasty started, so to say, by Uthman. They sort of took over. They took over for a full 90 years, from 661 to 750. Okay. And here I only show their, because that's the part that really interests us, I only show their conquests in the West. Okay. It included Spain, and we'll get back to Spain pretty quickly. All right. In the east, they went even further east than where Uthman had left off. They moved up into modern-day Uzbekistan, and they basically took almost all of Pakistan. Okay. I'll return to them in a moment. Let me just quickly mention the Abbasids. Okay, the Abbasids took over from them, and they really were a genuine dynasty. Genuine dynasty that lasted for 500 years. Okay. And the great movement for our story that's most important is the movement of the seat of the Caliphate from Syria, from Damascus, to Baghdad. By moving it to Baghdad, they ended up enhancing the influence and the power of the Gaonim, of the yeshivas. Okay? The power of the Gaonim was so extensive at its height. And remember, the Abbasids controlled this tremendous, tremendous area from North Africa all the way to the east. Jews from everywhere gave money to the two yeshivas, Sur and Pumbedisa, All shilas went to Surim Pimpadisa, and appointment of dayanim and rabbis emanated from the yeshivas in conjunction with the Reish Galusa, with the exilarch in Babylonia. So that was a seat of Jewish power, so to say, halachically, administratively, and with religious influence, and economically as well. Okay? And this is the period of the Gaonim. What's important to our story is that they did not hold on to Spain. They did not capture Spain from the Umayyads, and the Umayyads remained in Spain. So in this particular map, we talk about the hold that the Umayyads had in Spain up to 750. They stayed afterwards. The significance of the map of showing southern France going up to Poitiers or Tours, really, was that when they first came in in 711, a Berber. Berbers come from northwest Africa. The Berbers, the name of the leader was Tariq, and they named the main rock where you cross into Spain from Morocco. They called it Jabal Tariq, as we know nowadays, Gibraltar. Okay. In 717, they set their capital in Cordova. Okay. The Jews had been suffering under the Christian Visigoths terribly, so much so that when the Muslims started to show up in Spain, they actually helped them conquer Spain. Okay? And the Muslim crossed the Pyrenees, pushed into southern France as far as Poitiers or Tours, and they were defeated there in 732. Okay? This is where we are in around the year 1000. The year 1000 is really in the middle of what is called, what we Jews refer to, of course, as the Golden Age of Spain. Golden Age of Spain, okay, had lasted for a tremendous amount of time. It was started basically in the period of Abd ar-Rahman III in the second half of the 10th century. His closest advisor was Chizdai ibn Shaprut. Now, the Umayyads in general were relatively secular. Relatively secular means, in this context, that they not only encouraged the study of philology, language, poetry, philosophy, science, history, and the arts as they understood them, of course, without images, and music. They not only encouraged this, okay, and all kings at that time always had a court around them in these higher enterprises. However, they were secular in the sense that they were liberal. So even though the Jews and the Christians lived under dimitude, namely they are the protected people of the book, who are kept down, but on the other hand, protected in Islamic societies, okay? The Jews actually, through Chizdai ibn Shaprut, all of a sudden became involved in this cultural life in Spain, and this is the period of what we call the Golden Age in Spain. So during this period, the Jews had political power, not just artistic power. I'll mention some of the big names in a moment. Well, this is the map in 1000. The green part is where the Umayyads had. On top of that are the Christian areas, okay? And what happened was already by 1009, already the civil war started to break out in Spain. And the end of the Caliphate of Cordova, the rule of the Umayyad dynasty ended in 1031. 1031, the place is cut up into so many pieces. Especially the south is where the Islamists are. I forget if Toledo is still Islamic, but certainly the northern part is Christian. The Jews politically did very well during this period. Why? Every single local ruler needed Jewish artists, philosophers, etc. for his court. He needed Jewish administrators and financiers and used their talent. He even used them for military commanders. If I'm not mistaken, Shmuel HaNagid, among his many qualities, was a military commander as well. Okay, we sort of don't think that way, right? We only think we're all sort of, we're exclusively Luftmenschen. So, not so. This state of affairs lasted till 1040, when the Almoravids, Berbers coming out of southwestern Morocco, now invade and they take over Spain. Okay? So the Jews have lost political power, but among themselves, and even though they are more serious, less tolerant than the Umayyads, they are still doing quite well. And indeed, there's a sort of a who's who list of the Golden Age of Spain, among the Jewish philosophers, etc. Let me just fix something here. Where's the? Is this thing focused properly?
You're fine.
Yeah, you good? Okay. I guess I'm too close. That's why. Okay. As a list, it just seems to be a list. If you've had any higher education, you've sort of bumped into all of these names. The list consists of grammarians, lexicographers, people who wrote dictionaries, poets, and philosophers. Just about everybody on the list at least was in two places. The only one I don't know is Ibn Janach. He wrote a famous dictionary. I forget if he wrote a Sefer Diktuk as well. I'm not sure. Okay. Even if you don't know these names, you've actually met these people without being formally introduced. For example, if you sing Zmiros on Shabbos, well, Dror Yikra is written by Dunash. Correct? Okay. If you're in Shul on Erev Rosh Hashanah, the high point of the Slichos, Shofei Kol Haaretz, written by Shlomo Ibn Gviro. Okay. In the yeshivas nowadays, it's becoming more common that you'll meet Yehuda Halevi not in his poetry, but in his philosophy. If I recall correctly, Rav Amital Zatzal used to give shiurim in Kuzri in his work. And Avraham Ibn Ezra, most people know him from his commentaries on the Torah, but he was a great poet as well, to say the least, and grammarian. He was everything. He was quite a polymath as well. Things went bad with the Almohads. Starting in 1121. The first founder came out of the Atlas Mountains. That means Berbers, again, in the west of Morocco. That seems to be the place where these groups, these militarists, sort of spread out. And his successor, Abd al-Mumin al-Kumi, okay, he had invaded Spain and controlled it by 1154. 1154 already is now. The Rambam is alive. The Almohads are, by his death, he had covered all of Africa, including Tunisia and Tripoli. This map doesn't show it because it's for 1200. Apparently it moved back. Tripoli would be someplace down here, right? Okay. Now, the Umayyads, as I mentioned, were relatively secular, and the Almoravids were a little frummer. Well, the Almohads were real go-frum, okay? So there's a lesson. The world is the same everywhere. If B says he's frummer than C, watch out. A is going to come along and say he's frummer than B. And indeed, the Almohads accused the Almoravids of not being sufficiently religious. The great problem of their frumkeit is that there were tremendous persecutions of Jews and Christians at the time. It's not clear. It is not clear whether, in fact, there are reports. Let's put it this way: there are reports where they insisted on Jews either converting or being executed. It's not even sure. It's not even clear that they offered conversion or exile. They offered conversion or death. There are some reports among Jews that way, very few, and there are some reports among the Muslim authors as well. On the other side of the coin, there's a major poem of Ibn Ezra where he lists all the places where the Almohads and their invasion are basically destroyed. And in the poem, he does not mention this issue of forced conversion. In a later addition to the poem, strikingly enough, there is a mention of a forced conversion, and that is in the city of Fez in the northern Morocco. Okay? Which is kind of strange because, as we'll see, the city of Fez, in a few years, by the time, and part of our story, the city of Fez has a very live Jewish community. Okay. So it turns out, both from the Muslims, from the Muslim reports and the Jewish reports, it's clear that this persecution of Jews was horrific, but the issue of conversion or death is a mixed bag depending on time and place. Okay, depending on time and place. And it's not even throughout the whole area. That's the part that we need, because now we're entering the period of the Rambam. So this is the basic background that I need from the Islamists. Now, in order to talk about the Rambam's rabbinic tradition that he had, we have to back up a little to the great yeshivas of Babylonia, Sura and Pumbedisa. The older one, of course, is Pumbedisa, which is really originally was Nehardeh, but in the year 259, Nehardeh was destroyed by Papa Ben Netzar, and then they moved the yeshiva to Pumbedisa. Okay? The people that, for those of us who spend a little time in yeshiva, clearly Shmuel was Pumbedisa, all right? Old friends of ours are Rabba and Rav Yosef, Abaya and Rava. Rava was in a nearby town of Machoza. It could very well be that the yeshiva had moved there for a while he was there, okay? It flourished. There was a main yeshiva through the period of the Gaonim all the way down to 890 when it moved to Baghdad. Its great stars, so to say, at the end were Rav Shrira Gaon and his son Rav Hai Gaon. And then it closes shortly after. Okay, so it's a long, long tradition of well over, of close to 800 years for the yeshiva, and its beginnings, its beginnings in the period of the Tanoim. The little reading that I did, I could not find somebody say so-and-so founded the yeshiva at that time. It simply exists by the time the sources start talking about it. Okay? Surah, on the other hand, is founded by Rav. Rav left Israel to come to Eretz Yisrael to come to Bavel in 219. He came to Nehardeh, where Shmuel had been the reigning scholar, and Rav and Shmuel, their respect for one another was reciprocally great, and it was clear to Rav that he was, how should we say it in contemporary terms, he was invading Shmuel's turf. So he left. He left Nehardeh, founded the yeshiva in Surah. Surah was in an area of many. Of great Jewish population, but a highly uneducated Jewish population. Therefore, Rav went to Surah. Okay. The names that where is Surah? Whereas Pumbedisa is really, we know today, is Fallujah. Surah is someplace southeast of Najaf. These are names that show up in the papers. People that we know from our experience, so to say, friends of ours. The high spot in Surah was Rav Ashi, the closer of the Gemara, so to say. Later on, he died in 875, is Rav Amram Gaon, the one who put together, so to say, the first Siddur, so to say, as a written document. Okay, was Rav Amram Gaon. Also, the yeshiva moved to Baghdad around 890, and the brightest star in this period is Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon. What I have here for the 2 years is... whoops, sorry. Okay. Okay, Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon led the yeshiva only for 2 years. He was born in 882 and he died in 942. He basically did it all, from grammar to poetry to halacha to the fight with Ben Meir over the calendar to philosophy to the siddur, name it. He did it. And he said almost, in a way, he almost set the program for everything that came after him in this whole cultural world. It's kind of staggering to realize how much he had accomplished, and how much of everything, it's like everybody is reacting to Sadia Gaon. It's sort of in this culture, people are, in a sense, are not starting from scratch anymore. Okay? The yeshiva closed in 1033, okay? And later, the yeshivas reopened in Baghdad, merged. Okay, during this period already, needless to say, their authority and their leadership is on the wane. Okay, and so were their financial fortunes, to say the least. Okay. Part of the loss of their influence, besides everything, in general, was the rise of a new Fatimid named after Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, Fatimid dynasty in Egypt. So that sort of broke the dynasty apart, okay? And therefore their influence started to wane, okay? The next part is the part that we have here, this list of names, is the beginning of scholars that really came out of Italy, and they started two traditions that constituted North Africa and Spain. It's described in Ibn Dawud Sefer HaKabbalah, the story, the legend of the four Shvuyim that had left Italy, and ultimately Rav Chushiel, the father of Rabbeinu Hananel, ended up in Kairouan, in Tunisia, and Rab Moshe bar Rabbi Chanoch ended up in Cordova. And these two people started the traditions and learning that they were now the centers, sort of independent of the Babylonian yeshivas. Okay? The names over here, let's see. Rab Moshe bar Rabbi Chanoch, and his son and grandson, we sort of don't know that. We know them just from records. Namely, somebody in yeshiva does not have experience of these people. Okay? Rabbeinu Hananel, anybody who has spent time in traditional yeshiva learning, has met Rabbeinu Hananel. Clearly, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, the Riff. Okay? The Riff wrote, what the Riff did was he wrote, so to say, what they call Shas Katan. He wrote a short Shas. What is that? He looked at all laws that are pertinent to today, namely not laws that are theoretically not working. For example, Trumos and Maisros in Eretz Yisrael. He didn't write about that. In every single sugya in the Gemara, what he did was he wrote a precis of the sugya. What's the basic question? What are the basic opinions? What is the conclusion? Maybe he would include the key source, the key proof that is worth writing down for emphasis to the point. Anybody who's been through the back and forth of a sugya in the Gemara, all of a sudden every now and then wishes, I'd rather pick the shortcut in the Riff, okay? Go from the top to the bottom in no time flat, okay? Instead of going through the back and forth. That was the Riff. We'll discuss the Rambam's discussion of the Riff. The Riff actually was born in Fez, Alfasi, that might be the name of the family. It seems that he was born in a town actually right outside, but the family came from Fez. He went to Kairouan to study under Rabbeinu Hananel, Reb Nissim bar Rabbi Yaakov, came back to Fez, and then ultimately emigrated to Lucena in Spain. In Lucena in Spain, he actually met Ibn Gayat. If you're wondering who's Ibn Gayat, he's really an old friend. We more affectionately refer to him as the Regayas, okay? Back in the yeshiva days, all right? And a student of Yitzchak Alfasi is then Rabbi Yosef Halevi Ibn Magash, the Magash, and he's the Rebbe of the father of the Rambam. So this is, so to say, the Rambam's rabbinic lineage, okay, his pedigree. All right. To discuss who the Riff was, and this is crucial this is an important point in our story, in the introduction of the Rambam to the, I guess we're in the first one. If you want to look at it at your seat, or you may find it more convenient to look at it up on the screen. In the introduction, both in the introduction of the Rambam to his Mishnah Torah and to his Perush al Mishnah, namely to the commentary to the Mishnah and to the Code, he gives a schematic outline of the development of Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral law, starting from Moshe Rabbeinu and ending up almost where he is. In both particular stories, the close of the Gemara, Ravina Varavashi, that's the end of authority. Everybody else spends all their effort in understanding the work of the Gemara and in taking everything out of the work of the Gemara. And he describes how the Gaonim did their own work. They wrote short books on very many halachos, okay? And he mentions some of these books, and then he says as follows. It's the Riff. Hispiku b'makom kulam was sufficient in place of all of those other earlier works. Why? Because the works of the Riff, the Fish Kolalim, Kol to Alios Hapsokim Hamishpotim Hanitzrachim Bizmanenu Zeh Klomas Managolos. Why? Because his work on Shas includes everything that is necessary in this time, in the exile, okay, namely excluding the laws that apply exclusively to Eretz Yisrael. He has it all. And here's the kicker. Ukvar birer behem kol hashkiyos shenaflu bepiskei kodmov. He has already clarified all the mistakes that are already in all of the earlier writings of the Gaonim. And the Rambam says about himself, we have hardly any difficulties with anything that's in the Riff. You can't count them even on two hands. Okay? So it's an important statement. And the Rambam is now somewhere between 23 and 30 years old, and he probably wrote the introduction before he started the papers. He's 23 years old maybe. And what he's doing is he's declaring the end of the halachic authority of the Gaonim. Okay? Important point. Because the Riff cleared up everything. You don't have to go back to that literature, study the Riff. Okay? It's kind of important. And that's why I wanted to mention that. Next. Okay, there's very little hard biographical information about the Rambam. Terribly, terribly little. Okay? He used to be, according to one report, he was born in Cordova in 1135, and they even tell you what day, etc. But by his own testimony, it seems he was born in 1137, 1138. When I say that, what I mean is, he gives the Hebrew date. So it's from Rosh Hashanah 1137 around to the next Rosh Hashanah in 1138 when I write that, okay? A date is not available. We find him and his family in Fez already in 1159, 1160. Why? His father came to Fez, okay? And his father wrote an Igeret Nechama, an epistle of consolation. Namely, they wrote letters to the various Jewish communities, sort of encouraging them to take heart and to withstand the difficulties of the persecution of the Almohads, okay? And to really not lose faith, because ultimately, I mean, as the Gemara says, Shma do avida de batil. The Shma, the persecutions are never ending, okay? So the issue is to sort of prop people up with the promises of the future, and that we'll see our way through the persecution and we'll come out on the other side. This was promulgated by Rabbi Maimon from Fez. There's even a mention by one of the great scholars in Fez at the time that he thought that it was a sign of the Hashgacha. The Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam, was actually found in Fez in these difficult times, and he was in Fez, and it was a sign of the Hashgacha. Hashgacha el Yonah. So it's kind of strange to talk about that in Fez. In Fez, there was a consistent issue of conversion or death, and people living under the radar. It seems there's just too much public activity about it. We'll talk about it a little later. And he and his brother, his father, his brother David, they visit Eretz Yisrael in 1165. It seems to be around 1165. I'll talk about it in a second, okay? Within a year, they're in Egypt, and his father passes away, and that's around the time that he completes his commentary to the Mishnah. Those are like the raw parts in the first part of his life. The last thing I want to mention is that it's right in this period, in the 1160s, maybe 1170s, is when he writes the Igeret Hashmad and the Igeret Teiman. Igeret Hashmad was written for communities in North Africa where people were living a Morano type of existence, where they were willing to publicly display themselves as Muslims, But privately, they wanted to maintain the mitzvos, etc. And there was a challenge from a rabbi outside of those communities who said that what they were doing, that they were apokursim gemurim, you can't drink that, you can't touch their wine or whatever. Their prayers are insults to God, etc. And the Rambam wrote the Igeres Hashmad, the dafka the other way. He had to support these people, and he had to say yes, and he understood that what was being done was, needless to say, improper. But he said, any mitzvah you do counts as a mitzvah and it's very dear to God, etc. He says, but there's one caveat. You're not allowed to become comfortable with the situation. At the first opportunity, money or otherwise, you must leave the country and go to a place where you can live freely as a Jew. Okay? That was his letter the Igeres Hashmad to North Africa. At the same time, no less, there was a similar issue going on in Yemen, in Taiman. And it was complicated in Yemen because over there there was a false messiah showing up, giving false hopes to people, and people were taking him seriously. The situation was completely getting out of hand. So the Igeres Taiman is a masterpiece of supporting the people, seeing them through the crisis, on the one hand, damping the messianic fervor, on the other hand, giving messianic hope. The Taimanim to this day consider their gratitude for the Rambam as to how he saved them through this tough period is expressed in a number of ways. One of them, famously, is that we really have 3 halachic traditions today, or until modern times, maybe till the Aliyah in Israel. There is Ashkenaz, the Ramah. There's Sfard, the Mechaber or the Shulchan Aruch, Yosef Karo. And there are Taimanim. Throughout the whole history, the Rambam is the lone posek for the Taimanim. Okay? And that was an expression of how they saw themselves as his students for what he actually gave them. Okay, how did he get to Eretz Yisrael? There are 2 accounts, okay? All right? Oh, okay. A little high tech from my technology department here. That's about as high tech as we get. Okay. This is a report from Sadi ibn Danan in the 15th century that describes the Rambam as making his way to Alexandria, and from there making his way to Yerushalayim, and then back to Egypt. Okay. Another report, 400 years later, okay, it's in the Sefer Charedim from Elazar Azkari, describes him as from Fez going by boat, okay, going by boat to landing in Akko, then going to Yerushalayim, and then going to Kever Avos and the Moras HaMachpelah, and then ultimately making his way to Fastat, which is Old Cairo. Okay, the way I drew the arrow, I have no idea really what port he left, how much he did on land, how much he did. There's no mention of it. I just picked the port nearby Fez and put the arrow and put the line going through there. Okay. As we'll see later on, it turns out even according to the other, it's not clear that he went straight to Yerushalayim either from landing in Caesarea or from Yaffo. There's a good chance that he went through Akko even according to the other report, and we'll see it a little later. Okay. In Israel, in Egypt at the time, the Rambam arrived, had been ruled by the Shiites of Fatimids. Okay. And they, in 973, they built a new city called Al-Kahira, Cairo, and therefore where the Rambam ultimately settled, Fustat is always part, really just a small piece of what is called Old Cairo. Okay. Ultimately, the Ayyubids took over in 1171. Okay. And they were led by, they were already Sunnis. The Fatimids were Shiites, needless to say, and they based themselves on Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, so they were Shiites. Okay. They were Shiites, and the Sunnis took over by Salah al-Din. Okay, and of course now this area is now already the area where the Rambam lives. Okay. Okay, the next 10 years until 1177, the Rambam composes his Mishnah Torah, the great code of Jewish law. The great code. Hey, how you deal? Okay, we'll talk about it with a lot more next time, so I'd like to stay away from that for right now. Tragedy strikes around the year when he finishes the Mishnah Torah, his brother dies. It's tragedy on two accounts. One is his brother dies. Number two, the brother supported the family while he sat and learned. Okay, so now he had to go out and earn a living to support his own family and to support his brother's family at the same time. And this is when he becomes a practicing doctor. This is when he becomes a practicing doctor. By 1190, he's already a doctor having royal clients from the court. And by 1191, he's finished with the Moreh Nevuchim. There's a letter that already refers to the existence of the Moreh Nevuchim in 1191, and he dies in 1204. So that's short, the sketch. I mean, it's really skeleton, okay? And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to put a little meat on the sketch, okay? So now we'll sort of, mostly from here on in, we'll read inside, and we'll try to hear him speak as much as we can, okay? And I think just about all these letters are written in Hebrew, so we're cool. They're not translated, so we're hearing him directly. At the end of the Perush HaMishnah, after he finishes the last Mishnah and interpreting it, he then has a statement that we finally finished the Perush HaMishnah, and I ask everybody who finds any mistakes to be tolerant in their opinion of me, because I wrote this Perush on the road, so to say. Namely, he did not write it sitting in Cordova. He wrote it on the road from Cordova to Fez to Israel to Fostat. Okay, and he even describes how he had written it on the road and on the ship. He didn't have books, he didn't have references, etc. He wrote it on this, and then the closing. Ani Moshe B'Rabbi Maimon Hadayan, and now he gives his family genealogy down to Harav B'Rabbi Ovadia Hadayan Zecher Kedoshim Livracha. Turns out the family was named Ben Abad Allah. Ovadia. Right? That's how it's named in Arabic. Yeah? Abad is. Abdullah, yeah, Abdallah, right? Is Ovadia. That was a family name, apparently, in Arabic. He started his commentary on the whole Mishnah, okay, 23 years old. Hishlamti Asoba Mitzrayim, that's in Fostat. Vani ben Shloshim Shana, and that's 1167, 1168. The accounting that he gives is by the Seleucid dynasty, which the Sfaradim and the whole East counted throughout the periods. Counting from Seleucid chronology is from the year 311 BCE is the beginning of the Seleucid dynasty, after the breakup of the empire of Alexander the Great. Okay. Just a quick note about how the Teimanim how highly they thought of the Rambam. In the first controversy over the writings of the Ramban wrote a letter in his defense to quiet down, to tamp down the controversy. And he says in the merit of the Rambam that the Teimanim always referred to the Rambam in every single Kaddish. Just to stop you for a second, you realize that Kaddish is not a direct address to God. The Kaddish is addressed to the congregation. We speak in the third person. May God's name be great and become holy, right? His name become great and holy in the world that He created according to His will, and let His kingdom be established. So the person is speaking to the congregation, and the person says, "B'chayeichon uv'yomeichon." In your life and in your days, we want the Geula to come. So they added And here he says, "V'hayu mazkirim shem harav b'chol kaddish v'kaddish, b'chayechan uv'yomechan uv'chayei d'Rabbona Moshe ben Maimon." A sense of gratitude of what the Yigeres Teman had done. And he's a relatively young person, in the 1160s, 30 years old. Okay. And look at the impact that he had, not just in sitting in his own study and writing, but look at the impact he had in his public, work. Here is a scrap of paper from the Geniza. It's David's last letter to the Rambam before he drowns. At that time, he was in business. He was apparently a trader in gems, and he was in business looking for schayra in the Sudan, in the Sudanese port, in Idahab, whatever, Idahab, in a Sudanese port, and he didn't find good schayra. So with other traders and other people, he wanted to make his way to India, to make his way to India. And they ended up drowning in the Indian Ocean in a storm. Okay. So this is the letter that he wrote, okay? And now we'll read the Rambam's reaction to it. Okay. This letter to Rabbi Yefes Hadain was a dayan in Akko. And in this letter, the letter is 1185, Rabbi Yefes Hadain complains that the Rambam hasn't written to him. To which the Rambam answered, "You haven't written to me. You and I and my brother and my father, we all walked in Beis Elohim the Halech Baragish, we all walked on the Temple Mount together. And then we went, and here, within a year of that, my father died and I received letters of consolation from everywhere in the world. You didn't write. On the other hand, I don't hold the grudge, so I don't hold the grudge." And then he starts to speak as to why he is not writing. Now let's read this. Gam iruli tzaros rabos glios be'eretz Mitzrayim, mecholayim v'hafseid mamon v'amidas masrim malayla hargeni. As a leader of the Jewish community, he had people who were very happy to compete with him and to push him aside. And the lost money we understand, because now he's going to describe it. The worst calamity that has ever happened to me since the day I'm born, this is the death of my brother, who drowned in the Indian Ocean. Ubiyadom mamon rav, and he was carrying with him a tremendous amount of money. Li, my money, his money. Valachenim, he even had other parties' monies. V'hiniach bas ketanova almanoso etzli, and he left his daughter and his widow with me. V'nish'arti acharav kamos shana miyom shehigia hashmul hara'ah. For a full year after I heard this, I am left nofel al hamito b'shchin ra b'timhon levav. He's paraphrasing from the Chukosai, from the curses. He's simply flat on his back. He's on his bed, so to say, immobile, can't do a thing. Okay, sounds like a genuine nervous breakdown. V'chimat kar ha'isi ovein, and I was almost completely lost. V'achar kach ad hayom k'mo shmona shanim. It's already 8 years since he died. Ani mesabel, I am in mourning, v'lo hisnachamti, and I have yet to find consolation. Uvamoas nachein, where will I find consolation? V'hu haya habein, he was the son. Aberkai gadal, so I assume that this David was younger than the Rambam. V'hu haya ha'ach, he was the brother. V'hu ha'talmid, the student. V'hu shehaya nosei v'noseim bashuk. He was the one that allowed me to sit comfortably with no problems whatsoever, and he provided the sustenance. And he was quick in understanding the Gemara. And he was exceptional in language, namely mastering grammar, syntax, etc. The only true joy I ever had was when I saw him and was with him. The sun has set on all joy. And he went to eternal life. And he left me just simply terrified in a strange land. Any moment that I see his handwriting or one of his books, my heart turns over, and all my sadness all of a sudden gets re-aroused. And namely, bottom line, he quotes Yaakov Avinu when he thought he lost Yosef. I will follow my son down to the underworld in mourning. Okay. If not only the learning of Torah, which is my delight, and the study of science and philosophy, that, from the concentration, I'm able to push aside the sadness, I would be lost. I would simply be lost. Okay? So this was really the tragedy of his life. Okay? Okay. I now want to read the letter of Shmuel ibn that he wrote to Shmuel ibn Tibbon, which has some background. In the year, let me get the dates right. Okay. In around 1191, the Rambam was embroiled in a controversy with the Shmuel ben Eli in Baghdad over, number one, over his opinions on Tchias HaMesim, resurrection of the dead. And number two, over a Shiloh, whether you can go on a boat on the river past Tchum Shabbos, okay? And needless to say, it was clear, and this is after the publication of the Mishnah Torah. So the Rambam's attitude at this point was to simply push aside all the authority of the Gaonim and to cast, we'll talk about it next time in some detail, and to cast the Mishnah Torah as the last word. Hey Hayadiyah. I mean, the last word. So needless to say, there was this big pushback from Babylonia, the seat of the Gaonim. Okay. Surprisingly enough, he gets a letter in around in Tishrei, either 1195 or 1196. He gets a letter from Provence, from Rabbi Yonasan HaKoel in Lunel. Okay? And they have there, and in the letter, there is this, they have 24 questions about difficulties in the Mishnah Torah. Now, it turns out everybody knows about the Ravid, whose remarks on the Mishnah Torah were basically attacks against the Mishnah Torah. His vitriol and his attack is so great that in Hilchas Pesach, he actually at one spot says, I wish the Beis HaMikdash were here, and I wish the Rambam was my waiter, and he served me a Korban Pesach the way he says it's supposed to be, so I can then throw it down on the floor in front of him. Okay. All right. These guys didn't take any prisoners. Okay. All right. That's the Ravid. Okay. Rabbi Yonasan HaKohen in Lunel was his student. And if you look at a map, Lunel is not far from Posquier. Posquier nowadays is a village of Vauvert. So it's not far, okay? He was a student. When they asked the same 24 questions that are in the Ravid that they asked the Rambam, the letter was completely different. They didn't ask as an attack. They asked questions as students sitting at the feet of the master. And the praise with which they gave the Rambam and his work in the introduction before they came to the questions, and their request that he send them a copy of the Moreh, of the Guide to the Perplexed, to the Rambam, all of a sudden, he had a real audience. Here was a school who had appreciated the Mishnah Torah and appreciated the philosophical aspects of his work, okay? And all of a sudden, these are the people, this is his audience, that really appreciated what he did. He sent them the first 2/3 of the Moreh Nevuchim, okay? It took a couple of years till he answered their questions in halacha, all right? And then Shmuel ibn Tibbon had questions of the Rambam, of actual translation questions, namely because Shmuel ibn Tibbon realized that he was creating a vocabulary for philosophy in Hebrew, which had not really existed. Everything in Jewish philosophy until that point had been written in Judeo-Arabic. There was no Jewish philosophy written in Europe. It all came out of the Islamic countries. Okay, so he wrote to the Rambam asking him, and at one point he asks the Rambam that he wants to come visit the Rambam. Rambam says, "You want to come? Come. But the truth, I cannot receive you properly. So, but if you come, I would be very happy to see you for a short time, the little that I can see you." And now he describes his day. So let's read. He says, I live in Fostat. And the king is, I'll sort of translate it along. You can follow in the Hebrew. Either up, whoops. Yeah, good. And I live in Fostat, and the king is in Cairo. And between the places is two Tchumei Shabbos. So 2 Tchumei Shabbos is what, 4,000 cubits? It's about a mile and a half, something like that. And I have great responsibilities to the king. I must see him every single day at the beginning of the day. And if he has a problem, or there's a problem, somebody in his harem gets sick, okay? I don't get to leave Al-Qahira till late in the day. Most of the day is in the king's house. And then, of course, I have to stop off to see the vizier of the king, his first assistant. And then usually I end up having to talk to 1 or 2 of the officials there that I have to deal with their problems. Klalo shel davar, every single day, namely bottom line, every single day I go to Al-Qahira early in the morning, and if there are no problems and nothing goes wrong, I end up coming back to Fostat at noontime. So, well, once I get back, I find that the antechamber to my house is full of people. I am starved, and I find the antechamber full of non-Jews. Important, non-important, judges, policemen, just the riffraff, everybody. And they all know when I'm coming back. I go down from the animal, I wash up, and I have to go out to them and sort of calm them down to let me take a couple of minutes to grab a bite, as we would say. I go out to deal with their problems and to write prescriptions for them. The parade in and out of the house keeps on going till the nighttime. And he swears occasionally, B'Shuas HaTorah, he swears that sometimes it goes 2 hours into the nighttime. He says, I'm speaking with them and I'm lying flat on my back, exhausted. And the night comes and I'm at the ultimate end of weakness. And I basically can't speak. Sof davar, bottom line, a Jew cannot speak to me or come to me except on Shabbos. Then they all come after the davening. I tell the tzibur, I tell the leaders of the community what should be done during that week. I give them instructions. And then he says, V'yikra'u kriyah chalusha. We read a little. Ad hatzoharayim, till lunch. Till noontime they go. And then they come back a little in the afternoon and they read till Ma'ariv. That's his day. Okay. Then a few years later he wrote to the general collection of Chachamim in Lunel, and with this letter he sent them also the 3rd chelik of the Moreh Nevuchim, which we'll talk about next time. And this is kind of an amazing, amazing letter. Okay? He says as follows. V'atem alufi miyudai. How do you translate that? My confidants. Let's leave miyudai as my confidants. Chizku v'yametz levavchem. Take courage. Be strong. Harei ani modia lachem shelo nishar bizman hazeh hakosher laharim degel Moshe. There is no one left to raise the banner of Moshe Rabbeinu. Uledakdek b'divrei Ravina v'Ravashi, and to study the words of Ravina and Ravashi. Ela atem, only you. V'chol ha'arim asher svivosechem, and all the towns around you. Okay? He knew about the existence of the Ravid. I'm not sure he knew about the actual composition of the Hasagos. Shiadati she'atem kovim midrashas tova v'Hashem balei bina. And now what he does in the rest of the letter, he surveys all the places that he knows in his culture. He surveys all of them, and he shows how weakly learning is. So if you look at it, Eretz Yisrael in Syria is one. It's weak. B'chol Hagolo u'Bavel u'B'chol Shinar. That's Babylonia. The learning is on hard times. Then the same thing is where? In Saudi Arabia and in Yemen. Things are not good. In India, Jews don't even know the written Torah, and all they have is, all you know that the Jews in India is that they keep Shabbos and they circumcise for 8 days. Ilgim is Berberi, so that's on the western coast of Morocco. Okay? There's no learning of Torah Shabbat Peh Bechlal. And Viore Hamarav, that's the Maghreb, North Africa. Okay? And there's nothing, we know what went on there. The only thing is left is you in Lunel in Provence. He says, I'm old, I cannot save it anymore. That is amazing. Who's missing? Ashkenaz and France. The whole movement of Rashi and Balei HaTosfos has overtaken all of northern France. So the question is, this phrase here, V'chol he'orim asher svivosechem, all the towns around you. That sounds like we're just talking about the locale of Provence, doesn't it? I don't think it means the whole culture of Franco-Germany. That means he didn't know about it. He did not know the work of Rashi and the Balei. He did not know the work of the Balei HaTosfos. It's kind of staggering. Okay. And now we have to read the last letter. I'm getting close to running over time, but I'm not giving up on his last letter because that's the whole purpose of the talk. Okay. 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 So there was a Ger, Ovadia, who had been studying by a teacher, and apparently the student quoted to the teacher the Rambam, who says that a non-Jew, like the Yishmaelim, like the Muslims, who do not worship Avodah Zarah, okay, do not worship idols, like the Muslims. He says when they handle wine, the wine is forbidden to drink, but it's mutar bahana. You're allowed to do business with it. Okay? A genuine oved avodah zarah, you have to just pour it down the drain. There's nothing you can do. All right? That's what you said. And your teacher, v'omar l'cha rabcha, there, second to the last line, that the Muslims are of their avodah zarah. V'heshiv l'chach shelo kahogan, he spoke to you improperly. So badly, ad shenisatzavtu, till you felt badly, elibcha, v'nechlamta, and you were embarrassed and ashamed. And he said about you, v'karor alecha anei ksil kivalto, answer a fool according to his own foolishness. So he wrote to the Rambam asking. So the Rambam answered, Elu hayishmaelim enam ovdei avodah zarah klal. They are not idol worshippers. Uchvar nichrasa mipihem umilibam, and it's still stronger. V'hem yachadim la'el yisaleh yichud karaui. They have a doctrine of the one God that is proper. Yichud she'em bo dofi. There is nothing, there is no stain, there is no dross in their opinion, in their worship of the true one God. And then further, whoops, here we go, sorry. And then further down at the bottom, v'chein elu hayishmaelim. Here, in the part that's not that I'm not reading, he actually says, just because they say false things about them, we don't turn around and say about us. We don't turn around and say false things about them. We're made of different stuff. Okay. V'chein elu hayishmaelim hayom at the bottom. Kulam taf v'nashim nichraso avoda zorim mipihem v'to'usam v'tipshusam b'dvorim acherim he. In their belief in the one God, it is genuine, pure, and their foolishness and their nonsense is in other things, okay? And I can't write them down. Because there are Jews who are looking to do damage to me, so I can't tell you what is wrong. He goes on, and then finally he starts speaking about this teacher. And he says, was he a drunkard? That what? There are 36 places in the Torah where the Torah spoke against oppressing a ger, a proselyte. And oppressing is even with words, not just mean extorting monetarily, etc. And he goes on about that for a while. And then, at the end, he called you a fool. Tema gadolhu. It's an amazing kasha. Adam shehiniach aviv u'maladato malchus amo. A person who abandoned his family, his birthplace, and his own kingdom. V'yadam hanatuya. That kingdom rules the roost. They're the powerful ones. V'hevin be'ein libo. When he saw with the eyes of his heart. And he came to cling to a nation that is actually despised everywhere and is a slave to the rulers. And this person realized that the religion of this despised nation is the true religion, one of truth and righteousness. V'hevin darkei Yisrael, and he ultimately struggled and he learned and he understood the ways of the Jewish people. V'yoda shekol hadasos genuvos midasam, and he understood that all other religions are stolen from ours, right? V'hikira kol, and he recognized everything. V'radaf achar Hashem, and he chased after God. V'avar b'derech hakodesh v'nichnas tachas kanfei hashchina, and he went through the path of holiness, namely submitted himself to the milah. Yeah, v'nichnas tachas kanfei hashchina, and he ended under the wings of the Shechina. V'nisavak ba'afar raglei Moshe Rabbeinu, and he clung to the dust of the feet of Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabban Shel Kol HaNaviim, the master of all the prophets. V'chafetz b'mitzvosav, and he's desirous of all the mitzvos that Moshe Rabbeinu taught us. U'nesaol is bo, and he was ambitious in his heart. L'karva le'or ba'or hachayim, to actually bask and luxuriate in the light of life. Ulahalos b'malas hamalachim, and he wanted to elevate himself to the level of angels. V'lismoch v'lisane b'simchas hatzadikim, and to rejoice and to luxuriate in the joy of the tzadikim. V'shlich ha'olam hazeh milibo, and he threw away everything about this world. V'loponer al rohavim v'shatei chazav, and it doesn't bother with all false, misleading nonsense. Such a person is to be called a fool. God forbid. God has not referred to you as a fool. A person who understands and who is aware and who walks in the straight road. Talmido shel Avram Avinu, you are a disciple of Avraham Avinu. Sheheniach avosav u'moladato v'noto acharei Hashem. You're a disciple of Avram Avinu who abandoned his family, his birthplace, and everything, and who followed after God. Avram Avinu is the first ger. U'misha be'erach Avraham Avinu Avraham rabcha. He who blessed Avraham Avinu, your teacher, and he gave him his reward both in this world, and he will give him in the next world. Let he who gave the bracha to Avraham Avinu, God, He will bless you. And God will give you your reward both in this world and the next. And this is the ultimate bracha. He shall see to it that you will live long enough that you become the teacher of God's Torah to his people. The exact opposite of what he heard. And he will have you merit to see it, all the consolations that come to the Jewish people. And now the Rambam concludes quoting Moshe Rabbeinu. All the good that God will do for us, you will be part of it. You shall be a part of it. We will give to you. Ki Hashem diber tov al Yisrael. Moshe Barab Maimon Zatzal. Okay. Zchusay again, Elena. Okay.